Every parent's worst nightmare is watching their child face danger while feeling powerless to help. For Officer Jack Foster, that nightmare became someone else's reality when he answered a desperate 911 call from a pregnant woman named Olivia Carter. She was sobbing, blood still dripping from a fresh cut on her cheek where Ethan had slashed her with a knife before she managed to escape back inside her apartment. Her ex-partner was still out there somewhere, and she was terrified he would come back to finish what he started. Jack thought he knew what he was walking into. He had seen domestic violence cases before, but when he arrived at her apartment, nothing was as it seemed. The woman at the door wasn't just scared. She was hiding something much bigger than an abusive relationship. What Jack found that night would change both their lives forever. The truth was far more complicated and dangerous than a simple domestic dispute. But was Olivia really the victim she claimed to be? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Officer Jack Foster had been answering domestic violence calls for 15 years, and they never got easier. The radio crackled to life at 11:47 p.m. as he sat in his patrol car outside Miller's Diner, nursing his third cup of coffee of the night. Shift. Unit 23, we have a 1014 in progress at 1247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Female caller reports male suspect with a knife. Proceed with caution. Jack set down his coffee and started the engine. Maple Street was in the nicer part of town, where domestic disputes usually stayed behind closed doors until they couldn't anymore. He'd grown up in a house where his father's anger echoed through thin walls, where his mother made excuses for bruises that everyone could see but no one dared mention. Those memories made him better at his job, but they also made it harder to leave work at the office. The drive took 8 minutes through empty streets, lined with modest suburban homes. Jack had been through this neighborhood countless times, but tonight something felt different. Maybe it was the way the caller's voice had trembled, or the fact that she'd said, "He has a knife," with such specific terror. Most domestic violence calls involve shouting, sometimes pushing, occasionally worse. But weapons changed everything. As he pulled into the parking lot of Willow Creek Apartments, Jack noticed how quiet everything seemed. The complex was a series of 2-story brick buildings arranged around a central courtyard, the kind of place where young families saved up for their first real home. Security lights cast long shadows between the buildings, and most windows were dark except for the occasional blue glow of a television. He radioed for backup and checked his weapon, following protocol he'd practiced hundreds of times. Detective Zara Martinez would arrive within minutes. She was good at reading people and situations, which made her invaluable on these kinds of calls. Jack had learned to trust her instincts over the years they'd worked together. Apartment 3B was on the second floor of the middle building. As Jack climbed the external staircase, he could hear muffled sobbing from behind the door. No shouting, no sounds of struggle, just the quiet weeping of someone who'd been hurt. He knocked gently, using the tone he'd perfected for scared victims. "Ma'am, this is Officer Foster with the police department. You called for help." The sobbing stopped immediately, followed by the sound of multiple locks being turned. The door opened just wide enough to reveal a young woman with dark hair and frightened eyes. What struck Jack immediately was the fresh cut on her left cheek, a thin line of blood that had already begun to clot. She was holding a kitchen towel against the wound with one hand, while her other hand rested protectively over her obviously pregnant belly. "Are you Olivia Carter?" Jack asked softly. She nodded, stepping back to let him in. "He's gone, but I don't. And know for how long. He said he'd be back." Jack entered the apartment, quickly scanning for immediate threats. The living room showed signs of a struggle. An overturned chair, scattered magazines, a lamp knocked askew. But something didn't feel right about the scene. In his experience, violent confrontations left more obvious damage. This looked almost staged, though he couldn't put his finger on why. "Can you tell me what happened, Miss Carter?" Olivia sat heavily on the couch, still pressing the towel to her cheek. Ethan came by around 11, my ex-boyfriend. We've been broken up for 2 months, but he won't leave me alone. Tonight he was different, angrier. He kept asking about the baby, about who the father was. Jack pulled out his notebook, noting the timeline. Did he threaten you before tonight? Not like this. He's been calling and texting, showing up at my work, but tonight he had a knife. She shuddered, touching her belly again. I was so scared for the baby. Where is Ethan now? I don't know. I managed to get back inside and lock the door. That's when I called you. Jack studied Olivia's face as she spoke. The fear seemed genuine, but there was something else in her eyes. A calculation that didn't match the profile of a typical abuse victim. She kept glancing at her phone, which sat on the coffee table, and he noticed she'd changed clothes since the attack. The shirt she wore now was clean, while the one crumpled by the door had bloodstains. Ms. Carter, I need to ask, is the baby Ethan's? Olivia's hand tightened on the towel. No, that's part of why he's so angry. He thinks I cheated on him, but we were already having problems. The baby's father isn't in the picture. Detective Martinez's arrival interrupted the conversation. Jack heard her footsteps on the stairs and went to let her in. Sarah was a small woman with sharp eyes and an instinct for reading people that had served them well over the years. What do we have? She asked quietly. Jack filled her in while Olivia sat in the living room, still holding the bloody towel. Sarah listened without interrupting, but Jack could see her cataloguing details the same way he did. When he finished, she nodded toward the hallway. Something's off about this, she whispered. The wound looks self-inflicted, and the apartment, I know, Jack replied, but she's pregnant and scared. Let's get medical attention for her first, then figure out what's really going on. They returned to the living room, where Olivia was staring out the window, her free hand still resting on her belly. The protective gesture seemed automatic, maternal, in a way that struck Jack as completely genuine, despite his growing suspicions about the rest of her story. Ms. Carter, we'd like to get that cut looked at by a paramedic, and we're going to search the area for Ethan. Can you give us a description? Tall, maybe 6'2", brown hair, blue eyes. He was wearing a black jacket and jeans. She paused, then added, he drives a blue Honda Civic. As they waited for the paramedic, Jack noticed Olivia checking her phone repeatedly. Each time she looked at the screen, her expression grew more tense, as if she was waiting for a message that wasn't coming. When he asked about it, she claimed she was hoping her sister would call back. The paramedic arrived and began cleaning Olivia's wound. It was shallow, but would need stitches. As the medical attention drew Olivia's focus, Jack and Sarah stepped outside to discuss their next moves. We need to find this Ethan character, Sarah said. But I'm telling you, Jack, something about her. Story doesn't add up. Jack looked back at the apartment window where Olivia sat, getting medical treatment. Maybe. But pregnant women do strange things when they're scared. Let's focus on making sure she's safe first. What neither of them realized was that Ethan Ward was already beyond their help, lying in an alley 3 blocks away with a knife wound that had stopped bleeding hours ago. And the woman they were trying to protect was carrying secrets that would put all of their lives in danger before the night was over. The search for Ethan Ward began at midnight, with 2 patrol units canvassing the immediate area around Olivia's apartment complex. Jack and Sarah took the alley behind the buildings, following standard protocol for domestic violence situations. Where the perpetrator had fled the scene, Jack's flashlight beams swept across dumpsters and parked cars, looking for any sign of the blue Honda Civic Olivia had described. The alley was narrow, barely wide enough for the garbage trucks that came through twice a week, and lined with the back entrances to the apartment buildings. "Over here," Sarah called from behind a dumpster about 50 yards from Olivia's building. Jack jogged over to where Sarah was kneeling beside a motionless figure. Even in the dim light, he could see it was a man matching Ethan's description, tall, brown hair, wearing a black jacket and jeans. But this man wouldn't be threatening anyone ever again. He's been dead for a while, Sarah said, checking for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. Body's starting to cool. I'd guess at least 2 hours, maybe more. Jack felt his stomach drop as the implications hit him. 2 hours? Olivia called 911 at 11:47. If he's been dead for 2 hours, then he was already dead when she made that call, Sarah finished. And that cut on her face is self-inflicted. Jack ran his hand through his hair, trying to process what this meant. We need to get back to her right now. They called for the medical examiner and additional backup before returning to apartment 3B. Olivia was still sitting on the couch, now with 3 butterfly bandages covering the cut on her cheek. She looked up expectantly when they entered. "Did you find him?" she asked, her voice carrying what sounded like genuine hope. Jack sat down across from her while Sarah remained standing by the door. "Ms. Carter, we need to talk. We found Ethan." Relief flooded Olivia's face. "Thank God. Is he in custody?" "He's dead, Olivia." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Olivia's expression went through a series of changes: confusion, shock, and then something Jack couldn't quite identify. Fear, but not the kind someone feels when learning of a death. This was the fear of someone whose carefully constructed story was falling apart. Dead, but that's impossible. He was here just an hour ago. The medical examiner estimates he's been dead for at least 2 hours, Sarah said quietly. "Which means he was already dead when you called 911. Olivia's hand went to her throat, then to her belly. "I don't understand. If he's dead, then who?" She stopped speaking abruptly, as if realizing she was about to say too much. Jack leaned forward. "Olivia, we know you didn't tell us the truth about what happened tonight. The cut on your face. The way the apartment." "Looks. We've seen enough crime scenes to know what a real fight looks like. This isn't it." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of a clock on the kitchen wall. Olivia sat perfectly still, her hands folded over her pregnant belly, staring at something only she could see. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I can't tell you the truth. You wouldn't understand." "Try us," Sarah said, moving closer. Olivia shook her head. "It's not that simple. There are people. If they find out where I am..." She touched her belly again. "I can't let anything happen to my baby." Jack had interrogated enough suspects to recognize when someone was genuinely terrified versus when they were trying to manipulate the situation. Olivia's fear was real, but it wasn't fear of them or even fear of legal consequences. This was the deep, bone-level terror of someone who believed their life was in immediate danger. "Who are you afraid of, Olivia?" Before she could answer, Sarah's radio crackled. "Detective Martinez, we found something you need to see." They stepped outside where Officer Chen was waiting by the patrol car. "We found Ethan's wallet," he said, holding up an evidence bag. "It was in his back pocket. Driver's license confirms the ID, but there's something else." Chen pulled out a second evidence bag containing a business card and what looked like a roll of $100 bills. $10,000 in cash, and this card for something called Phoenix Security Solutions. "Never heard of them," Jack studied. The business card. It was expensive cardstock with a simple logo, a stylized phoenix rising from flames. No address, just a phone number and the company name. "Olivia!" Jack called, and she appeared in the doorway, still looking pale and shaken. "Do you know why Ethan would have been carrying $10,000 in cash?" Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The blood drained from her face and she gripped the doorframe for support. "Where did you find that?" "In his wallet, along with this business card." Jack showed her the Phoenix security card. Olivia's knees buckled, and Sarah caught her arm to steady her. "I need to sit down." They helped her back to the couch, where she sat with her head in her hands for several minutes. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "Ethan found out about my past," she said quietly. "Things I thought I'd left behind. He was blackmailing me." "What kind of past?" Jack asked gently. "I can't tell you everything. But 2 years ago, I witnessed something terrible. Something that put my life in danger. I've been hiding ever since, living under a new identity. Ethan discovered who I really was and threatened to tell people where I was unless I paid him. Sarah sat down beside her, and the $10,000 was supposed to be his payment for keeping quiet. But tonight, he changed the deal. He wanted more money, and he wanted— She touched her belly. He said he'd claim the baby was his, that he'd take custody once it was born unless I gave him everything he wanted. Jack felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. So you killed him. It was self-defense, Olivia said quickly. He came at me with the knife. I grabbed it, and we struggled, and— She started crying. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to leave me alone. Where did this happen? Not here in the apartment. In the alley. He was waiting for me when I got home from work. We fought, and then I realized he was dead. I panicked. I came upstairs and cut myself to make it look like he'd attacked me here. Sarah and Jack exchanged glances. The story still had holes, but it was starting to make sense. A woman in hiding, discovered by someone willing to exploit her desperation. Fear for her unborn child, driving her to violence she never intended. Who are you hiding from, Olivia? Jack asked. She was quiet for a long time, staring at the Phoenix security card in his hand. People who would kill me if they knew where I was. People who would kill my baby just to hurt me. And Phoenix security? They were supposed to protect me, but I haven't heard from my contact in weeks. I think something happened to him. Jack looked at the card again, then at the frightened woman in front of him. Whatever Olivia Carter's real story was, it was bigger and more dangerous than a simple domestic dispute, and now, whether he wanted to or not, he was part of it. The ride to the police station was quiet, except for the hum of the patrol car's engine and the occasional crackle of radio chatter. Olivia sat in the back seat, her hands resting on her belly, staring out the window at the empty streets. Jack kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, trying to reconcile the frightened pregnant woman with someone capable of killing a man in an alley. At the station, they placed Olivia in interview room 2, the one with the more comfortable chairs and better lighting. Jack had learned over the years that environment mattered when trying to get people to tell the truth. Fear and fluorescent lights rarely produced honest conversations. "Can I get you anything? Water? Something to eat?" Sarah asked as they settled. "In just water, please." Olivia's voice was hoarse from crying. 20 minutes later, a woman in an expensive suit knocked on the door. She was tall, blonde, and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way. "I'm Rebecca Morrison, Ms. Carter's attorney. This interview is over." Jack looked at Olivia in surprise. "You called a lawyer?" "My sister did," Olivia said quietly. "I texted her after everything happened." Rebecca Morrison didn't look like the kind of attorney someone's sister could afford on short notice. Her suit probably cost more than Jack made in a month, and she carried a briefcase that screamed high-end legal practice. "My client won't be answering any more questions without me present," Morrison said, settling into the chair beside Olivia. "Ms. Morrison," Sarah said, "your client has admitted to killing someone. We're trying to understand the circumstances. In self-defense, according to what I've been told. And given that my client is 7 months pregnant and was being blackmailed by the deceased, I think we can all agree this situation requires careful handling." Jack studied the lawyer's face. She was good, professional, controlled, giving away nothing. But there was something about how quickly she'd appeared, how she seemed to already know details about the case that suggested this wasn't a random criminal defense attorney pulled from a phone book. "Can we at least establish some basic facts?" Jack asked. "Your client was living under an assumed identity. We need to know who she really is and why she was hiding." Morrison whispered something to Olivia, who nodded reluctantly. "My real name is Emma Rodriguez," Olivia said. 2 years ago, I was working as a paralegal in Chicago. I witnessed—" She stopped and looked at her lawyer. "Go ahead," Morrison encouraged. "I witnessed a murder. A federal prosecutor named David Kim was killed by someone I recognized. I testified in the trial, and the man I identified was convicted. but afterward there were threats against my life. The FBI helped me relocate and start over with a new identity. Jack felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. And Phoenix Security? They took over my protection when the federal program ended. Agent David Cross was my handler. But I haven't heard from him in 3 weeks. Sarah made a note. We'll need to verify all of this. Names, case numbers, contact information. After Morrison and Olivia left with instructions not to leave town, Jack returned to his desk to start making phone calls. The Phoenix security number went straight to voicemail with a generic message. The Chicago FBI field office was closed until morning, but he left messages for the duty officer. I'm going back to search her apartment, he told Sarah. Something doesn't add up about this whole situation. Want company? Yeah. And bring the fingerprint kit, if she's been living under a false identity. I want to know what else she's been hiding. The apartment complex was quiet at 2 a.m. Crime scene tape still blocked access to the alley where Ethan's body had been found, but Jack's focus was on apartment 3B. They used Olivia's keys, which she'd reluctantly provided at her lawyer's advice. The apartment looked different in the harsh beam of their flashlights. What had seemed like the aftermath of a struggle earlier now looked more carefully arranged. Jack started in the living room while Sarah checked the bedroom. Jack, you need to see this, Sarah called from the bathroom. Behind the toilet tank, hidden in a plastic bag, was a cell phone Jack hadn't seen during their initial search. It was an older model smartphone, the kind people used when they didn't want to be easily tracked. Let's see what's on here, Jack said, powering it on. The phone was password protected, but it showed 17 missed calls from a number with a 312 area code, Chicago. There were also numerous text messages from various numbers, all using what appeared to be code words. Package needs relocation, Sarah read over his shoulder. Previous arrangement compromised. Phoenix has gone dark. Jack scrolled through more messages. Emma R. needs immediate extraction. Marconi crew active in Chicago area. All safe houses compromised. Marconi, Jack said. Why does that name sound familiar? Sarah was already pulling up databases on her phone. Vincent Marconi, Chicago organized crime family, was convicted 2 years ago on federal racketeering charges, but his conviction was overturned on appeal 6 months ago. He's back on the streets. Jack felt cold understanding wash over him. She testified against Vincent Marconi, and now he's free, looking for the woman who put him away. Sarah continued reading from her phone. 3 other witnesses from the Marconi trial have been found dead in the past 4 months, all ruled accidents or suicides. They spent another hour searching the apartment, finding additional evidence that Olivia, Emma, had been preparing to run. Clothes were packed in a suitcase hidden in the bedroom closet. Cash was hidden in various locations around the apartment. In the kitchen, taped under a drawer, they found a key to a storage unit. She's been planning to disappear, Jack said. The question is whether Ethan's death was really self-defense or if she killed him because he was threatening to expose her location. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. Crime scene finished processing the alley. They found something else. 20 minutes later, they were back at the scene where Ethan died. Officer Chen met them with another evidence bag. Found this wedged under the dumpster, he said. Looks like it got kicked there during the struggle. It was a gun. A .38. Revolver with 1 round fired. The serial numbers had been filed off, making it untraceable. So Ethan had a gun too, Sarah said. Jack studied the weapon and the scene with new eyes. Or Olivia. Emma had the gun. Maybe she shot him first, then used the knife to make it look like a struggle. Either way, this wasn't a simple case of self-defense. This woman planned to kill Ethan Ward, and she's been lying to us from the beginning. As they drove back to the station, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The encrypted phone, the hidden cash, the careful staging of the crime scene. It all pointed to someone with experience in deception and violence. But the way Olivia protected her belly, the genuine fear in her eyes when she talked about threats to her baby, that felt real. The question was, How much of Emma Rodriguez's story was true, and how much was the carefully constructed lie of someone who'd learned to survive by any means necessary? Jack arrived at the station at 6 a.m. with coffee and a determination to get answers about Phoenix Security Solutions. His first call was to the number on the business card they'd found on Ethan's body. This time, instead of voicemail, a woman answered on the second ring. "Phoenix Security, how may I direct your call?" "This is Detective Jack Foster with the Metro Police Department. I need to speak to someone about one of your clients, Emma Rodriguez." There was a long pause. "Please, hold." The hold music played for nearly 10 minutes before a man's voice came on the line. "Detective Foster, this is Marcus Webb, Director of Operations. I understand you're inquiring about one of our clients, Emma Rodriguez. We found your business card on a murder victim who was apparently blackmailing her." Another pause. "Can you provide some verification of your identity? This is a very sensitive situation." Jack provided his badge number and contact information for the police department. Webb promised to call back within the hour. When the phone rang 45 minutes later, Webb's tone had changed completely. "Detective Foster, I've verified your credentials. I need to tell you that Emma Rodriguez, the woman you know as Olivia Carter, is in extreme danger. Her handler, Agent David Cross, was found dead 3 days ago in a Chicago parking garage." Jack felt his stomach tighten. "Murdered? Shot execution style. David was one of our best operatives, former FBI. Whoever killed him knew exactly what they were doing. And Emma doesn't know this? We've been trying to reach her for a week. When David missed his scheduled check-in, we sent backup agents to her location, but she'd already changed addresses. We've been searching for her ever since." Sarah walked into Jack's office as he was taking notes. He put the call on speaker. "Mr. Webb, this is Detective Sarah Martinez. Can you tell us why Emma needed protection in the first place?" She testified against Vincent Marconi in a federal racketeering case. Her testimony was crucial in securing his conviction. When Marconi's conviction was overturned and he was released, the threats against Emma escalated immediately. "What kind of threats?" "Marconi made it clear he intended to kill her personally, but it's more complicated than simple revenge. Emma has evidence that could link Marconi to additional crimes, murders, money laundering operations that weren't in part of the original trial." Jack leaned forward. "What evidence?" "That's classified information, Detective. What I can tell you is that Marconi believes Emma has something that could put him away for life. He's willing to risk everything to get it back." Sarah made notes as Webb continued. 3 other witnesses from the Marconi trial have been killed in the past 4 months. Each death was made to look accidental, but we know Marconi's people were responsible. Emma Rodriguez is the last living witness. Where is Marconi now? Unknown. He disappeared from his Chicago residence 2 weeks ago. We believe he's been hunting Emma personally. After ending the call, Jack and Sarah drove to the storage unit, whose key they'd found in Emma's apartment. Unit 247 at Secure Store was a 10 by 10. Space filled with boxes, furniture, and the remnants of a life abandoned in a hurry. "Look at this," Sarah said, opening a cardboard box labeled Personal Documents. Inside were photographs, legal papers, and what appeared to be financial records. But buried beneath the paperwork was something that made Jack's breath catch: a small digital recorder and a manila envelope marked Insurance Policy. The recorder contained hours of conversations between Emma Rodriguez and Agent David Cross. As they listened in Jack's car, the full scope of Emma's situation became clear. The evidence Marconi wants is digital files stored on encrypted servers, Cross's voice explained on the recording. Emma made copies of financial records from her law firm that show how Marconi laundered money through legitimate businesses. But there's more. She recorded conversations between Marconi and a federal judge who was taking bribes. Emma's voice, younger and more scared than the woman they'd been interviewing, responded, "I never meant to overhear those conversations. I was just doing my job, filing papers in the conference room. But when I realized what they were talking about, you did the right thing by coming forward. But Marconi will never stop looking for you. These files are the only thing keeping you alive, because if he kills you without getting them first, they'll be released automatically. What do you mean automatically? I've set up a dead man's switch. If you don't check in with me every 72 hours, the files get sent to the FBI, the press, and the Chicago District Attorney. Marconi knows this, which is why he needs you alive. Long enough to tell him where the files are hidden. Jack stopped the recording. So Emma has been living with the knowledge that Marconi can't kill her until he gets those files. But if Agent Cross is dead, then the dead man's switch might have already been triggered. Jack started the car. We need to find Emma right now. They drove to Rebecca Morrison's law office, a glass tower downtown that screamed expensive. Legal services? Morrison met them in the lobby, looking less composed than she had the night before. My client is safe, she said, without preamble. But she can't stay in police custody. There are people looking for her who have resources you can't imagine. Where is she? Somewhere secure. But Detective Foster, you need to understand, Emma Rodriguez isn't just a witness. She's carrying information that could bring down one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the country. The people protecting her now aren't just lawyers. Jack studied Morrison's face. Phoenix Security. Morrison didn't confirm or deny, but her expression was answer enough. Ma'am, with respect, a pregnant woman who killed someone in an alley is still our jurisdiction. Phoenix Security or not. What if I told you that keeping her in your custody would put every officer in your department at risk? Marconi has killed. Federal agents, detective. Local police won't slow him down. Sarah stepped forward. Then help us help her. Tell us where the evidence is hidden. Let us verify her story, and maybe we can work together to keep everyone safe. Morrison checked her watch. Emma is supposed to check in with the dead man's switch system in 18 hours. If she doesn't, if something happens to her, those files get released, and Marconi will have nothing left to lose. Meaning he'll kill everyone who had any connection to this case, starting with the two of you. Jack felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. What had started as a domestic violence call was now a federal case involving organized crime, witness protection, and a pregnant woman whose survival depended on information that could destroy a criminal empire. We need to see her, he said, finally. If we're all in danger, then we need to work together. Morrison nodded slowly. Follow me. But Detective Foster, once you see where we're going, there's no turning back. You'll be part of this whether you want to be or not. The safe house was 30 miles outside the city, a modest farmhouse surrounded by rolling hills and enough open ground to see anyone approaching from miles away. Jack and Sarah followed Morrison's BMW down a gravel road that seemed to lead nowhere, until the house appeared around a bend. Emma was sitting on the front porch when they arrived, her hands resting on her belly as she watched their cars approach. She looked smaller in the daylight, more vulnerable, but Jack could see the wariness in her posture, the careful positioning that allowed her to move quickly if needed. How are you feeling? Sarah asked as they joined her on the porch. Like I'm living in a nightmare that keeps getting worse. Emma's voice was tired but steady. Rebecca told me about Agent Cross. Jack sat down in the chair across from her. I'm sorry, I know he was trying to protect you. David saved my life more times than I can count. When the federal protection program ended, he could have walked away. Instead, he risked everything to keep me safe. Tears started in her eyes. And now he's dead because of me. This isn't your fault, Sarah said gently. You were just doing the right thing. Was I? Sometimes. I wonder if I should have kept quiet, pretended I never heard those conversations. Maybe David would still be alive. Maybe, she touched her belly, maybe my baby would have a normal life instead of this. Morrison emerged from the house with a man Jack hadn't seen before, tall, graying, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. He introduced himself as Tom Wilson, David Cross's former partner. Agent Wilson is helping coordinate Emma's protection now, Morrison explained. Wilson shook hands with both detectives. I've been briefing myself on your case. What you've stumbled into is bigger than a simple murder investigation. How much bigger? Jack asked. Wilson gestured for them to follow him inside. The farmhouse looked ordinary from the outside, but the interior had been modified with security equipment, reinforced doors, and windows that Jack suspected were bulletproof. Vincent Marconi isn't just a crime boss, Wilson began, spreading files across the kitchen table. He's been operating a network that reaches into federal law enforcement, the judicial system, and local police departments across the Midwest. Sarah picked up a photograph of Marconi, a man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. How does Emma fit into all this? 2 years ago, Emma was working as a paralegal at Morrison, Blake and Associates. Wilson glanced at Rebecca Morrison. Her firm was handling legitimate business for some of Marconi's front companies. Emma was in the wrong place at the wrong time when Marconi met with federal Judge Patrick Sullivan. Judge Sullivan was taking bribes, Jack asked. Millions of dollars over 10 years. Emma overheard them discussing specific cases, including the murder of prosecutor David Kim. Marconi wasn't just ordering hits. He was coordinating with Sullivan to ensure the investigations went nowhere. Wilson pulled out a thick manila folder. These are Emma's original case files from the FBI. Her testimony helped convict Marconi, but more importantly, she recorded those conversations with Judge Sullivan. Emma spoke up from where she sat by the window. I had a digital recorder in my briefcase. I was using it to take notes for my boss. When I realized what I was hearing, I kept recording. Those recordings are the evidence Marconi wants, Wilson continued. They implicate not just him, but an entire network of corrupt officials. If those files become public, it would destroy everything he's built, Sarah finished. Exactly, but there's more. Wilson's expression grew grim. Emma isn't just a witness. She's Vincent Marconi's daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack stared at Emma, who was looking out the window with tears streaming down her face. That's impossible, Sarah said. Her name is Emma Rodriguez. Rodriguez was her mother's maiden name, Wilson explained. Emma's full name is Emma Rodriguez. Marconi. Vincent abandoned her and her mother when Emma was 5 years old. Jack felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. You're telling us that the woman we're protecting is the daughter of the man who wants to kill her? Emma finally turned from the window. I didn't know who my father was until I was 23. My mother told me he was dead. When I started working at the law firm and heard his name, I did some research. DNA testing confirmed it. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because I knew how it would sound. The daughter of a crime boss happens to overhear conversations that could destroy him. Who would believe that was a coincidence? Wilson spread out more documents. It wasn't a coincidence. We believe Marconi arranged for Emma to get the job at Morrison, Blake and Associates. He was planning to use her as an inside source, a way to monitor what the firm knew about his operations. But I never spoke to him, Emma said quickly. I didn't even know he knew I existed until after the trial. He knew, Wilson said grimly. Vincent Marconi had been watching his daughter for years, waiting for the right moment to make contact. What he didn't expect was for her to turn against him. Sarah leaned back in her chair. So, when Emma testified, she wasn't just betraying a criminal. She was betraying her father. Wilson closed one of the files. That's why this has become so personal for Marconi. It's not just about the evidence anymore. It's about a daughter who chose justice over family. Jack looked at Emma, trying to reconcile this new information with the frightened, pregnant woman he'd been trying to protect. The baby? Is the father connected to any of this? Emma's hand went instinctively to her belly. No, the father was a teacher I dated for a few months. He doesn't know about the pregnancy, and I intend to keep it that way. He's a good man who doesn't deserve to be dragged into this nightmare. Emma, Morrison said gently, you need to tell them about the hospital records. Emma sighed deeply. When I found out I was pregnant, I had to use my real identity for the medical records, insurance, family history, genetic screening, everything that matters for prenatal care. If anyone traces those records, they'll know exactly where you've been getting medical treatment, Jack finished. Wilson nodded. We've been monitoring the hospital's computer systems, but yesterday someone tried to hack into their patient database. We think Marconi's people are getting close. Jack's phone buzzed, with a text message from Officer Chen. Need you back at station ASAP. Found something on Marconi surveillance. I need to get back, Jack told the group, but I want someone with Emma at all times. If Marconi is as close as you think, already handled, Wilson said. But Detective Foster, you need to understand something. By being here, by knowing what you know now, you've become a target too. Marconi can't afford to leave loose ends. As Jack and Sarah drove back to the station, Sarah voiced what they were both thinking. Jack, this is way beyond our pay grade. We're talking about federal witnesses, organized crime, corrupt judges. I know. But that woman back there is 7 months pregnant and scared out of her mind. Her father wants to kill her, and the people who were supposed to protect her are dropping like flies. So what do we do? Jack thought about Emma sitting on that porch, her hands protectively covering her unborn child, tears streaming down her face as she talked about her father who had abandoned her as a child and now wanted her dead. We do our job. We protect and serve, even when it's complicated. When they reached the station, Officer Chen was waiting with surveillance footage from various businesses around Emma's apartment complex. Look at this, Chen said, pointing to the screen. Same car, different nights, always between 2 and 4 a.m. The footage showed a black sedan with Illinois plates making slow passes by the apartment building. In one clear shot, they could see the driver, a man in his 40s with a scar running down the left side of his face. Run the plates, Jack ordered. 20 minutes later, they had their answer. The car was registered to Vincent Marconi. Jack immediately called the safe house to warn Wilson about Marconi's surveillance. The phone rang 6 times before Wilson answered, and Jack could hear tension in the agent's voice. We know, Wilson said before Jack could speak. We spotted the car an hour ago. Marconi's not just watching anymore, he's closing in. How many people does he have with him? At least 4 that we've identified. Professional muscle, not street thugs. These guys know what they're doing. Jack felt his stomach tighten. What about Emma? She's safe for now, but we need to move her. There's a secondary location about 50 miles north, but Wilson's voice was interrupted by what sounded like Emma crying in the background. What's happening? She's having contractions. Started about 20 minutes ago. Could be false labor. From stress or she's going into premature labor. Jack was already grabbing his keys. We're on our way. Jack, if you come here, you're walking into a potential war zone. Marconi isn't going to wait much longer. Then we get her out of there before he makes his move. The drive to the safe house felt like the longest 50 minutes of Jack's life. Sarah rode shotgun, coordinating with Wilson and checking in with the hospital to see if they had any obstetric staff who could meet them. The contractions are 8 minutes apart now, Sarah reported after hanging up with Wilson. If this is real labor, we've got maybe 6 hours before the baby comes. And if Marconi attacks before then we figure it out as we go. When they reached the farmhouse, Jack could see why Wilson was concerned. The black sedan was parked on a hill about half a mile away, close enough to watch the house, but far enough to avoid being an immediate threat. Through binoculars, Jack could see at least 2 figures in the car. Inside the house, Emma was pacing the living room, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other supporting her belly. Morrison sat nearby with a stopwatch, timing the contractions. How are you feeling? Jack asked. Like my body picked the worst possible time to go into labor. Emma managed a weak smile between contractions. Wilson says we need to move, but I don't think I can handle a car ride right now. Dr. Sarah Kim arrived 30 minutes later with a bag of medical supplies. She was a family practitioner who had volunteered to help after Wilson explained the situation. Let me examine you. Dr. Kim said gently, leading Emma to the bedroom. While the doctor worked, Wilson briefed Jack and Sarah on their options. The secondary safe house is more secure, but it's a rough road and would take 2 hours in Emma's condition. There's also a cabin about an hour north that belongs to my retired partner, but it's completely off the grid. No phone, no backup if something goes wrong. What about the hospital? Too public. Too many ways for Marconi to get to her. Dr. Kim emerged from the bedroom looking concerned. She's in active labor. The baby is coming tonight whether we're ready or not. Moving her now would be dangerous for both her and the child. Jack looked out the window at the black sedan on the hill. So we're stuck here. Not necessarily, Wilson said. I've got a helicopter pilot who owes me a favor. He could be here in 2 hours, but we'd need a landing zone, and with Marconi watching, he'd see it coming from miles away, Sarah finished. Emma appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame as another contraction hit. There's something I need to tell you, she said when the pain passed. Something Wilson doesn't know. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. Agent Cross gave me this before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to someone I trusted. Jack opened the locket. Inside, instead of a photograph, was a tiny USB drive. The evidence, Emma said. The recordings, the financial documents, everything that could destroy my father's organization. It's all on there. Wilson stared at the drive. David never told me he'd made a physical copy. He said the digital dead man's switch was just insurance. This was the real evidence. Emma had another contraction, stronger than the previous ones. If my father gets this, he can destroy it, and everyone who knows about it. And if he doesn't get it, the files get released automatically in, she checked her watch, 14 hours. Dr. Kim reappeared with her medical bag. I need to check her progress again. The contractions are getting stronger and closer together. As the doctor led Emma back to the bedroom, Jack's phone rang. The caller ID showed a Chicago number he didn't recognize. Detective Foster, this is Vincent Marconi. Jack's blood went cold. He motioned for Wilson to listen in. Mr. Marconi, I think it's time we had a conversation about my daughter. I'm listening. She's in labor, isn't she? I can see the doctors. Car in your driveway. Marconi's voice was calm, almost grandfatherly. That's my grandchild about to be born, detective. My flesh and blood. What do you want? I want to see my daughter. I want to be there when my grandchild is born. And I want the evidence she's been holding over my head. Jack looked at Wilson, who was shaking his head vigorously. And in exchange? In exchange, I let everyone in that house live to see tomorrow. Refuse and I come take what's mine. How do I know you'll keep your word? Marconi was quiet for a moment. Because despite what my daughter thinks of me, I'm not a monster. I'm a grandfather who wants to hold his grandchild. From the bedroom came the sound of Emma crying out in pain. Dr. Kim called for towels and hot water. You have 1 hour to decide, Marconi continued. After that, I'm coming for my family, and I won't be as generous with the terms. The line went dead. Wilson was already on his radio calling for backup, but Jack knew it would take time for federal agents to reach them. Time they didn't have. What do we do? Sarah asked. From the bedroom, Dr. Kim called out, The baby's coming. Now, I need help. Jack looked at the USB drive in his hand, then at the bedroom where Emma was bringing new life into a world full of danger and impossible choices. We protect her, he said finally. Whatever it takes. Outside, the black sedan had disappeared from the hill. Vincent Marconi was done watching. While Emma labored in the bedroom with Dr. Kim attending to her, Wilson pulled Jack aside with a manila envelope that looked like it had been carried for years. There's something about Emma that I haven't told you, Wilson said quietly. Something David Cross discovered just before he was killed. Jack took the envelope, noting Wilson's hesitation. What kind of something? The kind that changes everything we thought we knew about this case. Inside the envelope was a birth certificate, DNA test results, and what appeared to be a handwritten letter in David Cross's handwriting. Jack scanned the documents, feeling His understanding of the situation shifted with each line he read. "This says Emma was born in witness protection," Jack said slowly. "That her mother was already hiding from Marconi when Emma was born." "Keep reading." The DNA results showed what Jack had expected. Emma Rodriguez was indeed Vincent Marconi's biological daughter, but Cross's letter revealed something far more complex. Maria Rodriguez wasn't just Vincent Marconi's girlfriend, Jack read aloud. She was an undercover federal agent named Maria Santos, assigned to infiltrate Marconi's organization in 1995. Emma is the daughter of a crime boss and a federal agent. Wilson nodded grimly. Maria Santos spent 3 years inside Marconi's organization before she disappeared. The FBI assumed she'd been killed, but she'd actually fallen in love with her target and become pregnant with his child. So Emma's mother was living a lie too. It gets worse. Maria never told the FBI she was pregnant. She disappeared completely, took the name Rodriguez, and raised Emma in hiding. Marconi never knew he had a daughter until Emma's DNA was run through federal databases during the original investigation. Jack felt pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking together. That's why Marconi arranged for Emma to get the job at the law firm. He was trying to reconnect with the daughter he'd never known. Right, but what Marconi doesn't know, what Emma herself didn't know until David told her, is that her mother left detailed records of Marconi's operations. 20 years' worth of inside information about his criminal empire. From the bedroom came Emma's voice, strained with pain. "Something's wrong, the baby, something's wrong." Dr. Kim appeared in the doorway, her face grave. "I need to get her to a hospital. The umbilical cord is wrapped around the baby's neck. If I can't deliver soon..." "How soon?" Wilson asked. "Minutes, not hours. And I need equipment I don't have." "Here." Jack looked out the window. Marconi's men had positioned themselves around the property, but they weren't attacking. They were waiting. "Wilson, there's something else," Jack said, remembering the envelope's remaining contents. "What's this music box?" Wilson's expression grew even more serious. "David's final message. He recorded it the night before he was killed." Jack wound the tiny mechanism, and David Cross's voice emerged from the small speaker, tinny but clear. "If you're hearing this, Emma, then I'm probably dead. What I'm about to tell you will be hard to understand, but you need to know the truth about your family." Emma's scream from the bedroom interrupted the recording. "Your mother didn't just gather evidence against your father during those 3 years. She gathered evidence that your father isn't the head of his organization. He's been working for someone else, someone who's been using the Marconi name as a front while building the real criminal empire." Jack stopped the music box. "Who?" Wilson looked toward the bedroom where Dr. Kim was calling for help. "Judge Patrick Sullivan, the man Emma recorded taking bribes from Marconi. He's not just corrupt. He's been running the entire operation from the bench." The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. So Marconi is trying to protect his daughter from his own boss. Sullivan ordered the hits on the other witnesses. Sullivan wants Emma dead because she's the only one who can prove. He's been running a criminal enterprise from the federal courthouse. Dr. Kim rushed out of the bedroom. "I need to do an emergency C-section, and I need to do it now. The baby's in distress, and Emma is losing too much blood. Can you do it here? With what I have? It's incredibly risky for both of them." Jack's phone rang again. "Marconi. Detective, my patience is wearing thin. Your daughter needs medical attention. The baby, your grandchild, is in danger." For the first time, Marconi's voice cracked. "What kind of danger? The kind that requires a hospital?" "Dr. Kim says..." "I know Dr. Kim. She delivered my grandson last year." Marconi was quiet for a moment. "She's good. If she says Emma needs a hospital, then that's where we go." "We?" "Detective, I'm not the monster you think I am. I'm a father whose daughter is in trouble. Judge Sullivan wants her dead, and he's got resources that make my operation look like a corner candy store." Jack felt the world tilting again. "You know about Sullivan?" "I've known for months that he was planning to eliminate Emma. Why do you think I've been trying to find her first?" From the bedroom came Dr. Kim's urgent voice. "I'm losing them both." Jack made a decision that went against everything he'd been trained to do. "Marconi, if you want to save your daughter and grandchild, then we work together. Right now, what do you need?" "A way to get Emma to a hospital without Sullivan's people intercepting us. Consider it done. But, Detective, once we do this, there's no going back. Sullivan will know you're working with me, and he'll come for you too." Jack looked at the music box in his hand, thinking about David Cross's sacrifice, about Emma's mother spending 20 years in hiding, about a pregnant woman who tried to do the right thing and ended up trapped between two impossible choices. Then, "We better make sure we stop him." 20 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up to the safe house. Vincent Marconi emerged from the lead vehicle, not the monster Jack had imagined, but a tired-looking man in his 60s with genuine fear in his eyes. "Where is she?" he asked. Dr. Kim met them at the door. "We need to move her now. I've managed to stabilize both of them temporarily, but my helicopter is 5 minutes out," Marconi said. "It'll take us straight to Metropolitan General. I've already called ahead. Dr. Peterson, the best obstetric surgeon in the state, is waiting." As they carefully moved Emma to a stretcher, she opened her eyes and saw her father for the first time in over 20 years. "Papa," she whispered. Marconi's composure finally broke. "I'm here, Mija. I'm going to make sure you and the baby are safe." Jack helped load the stretcher into the helicopter, still clutching the USB drive, with evidence that could destroy not just Marconi's organization, but the corrupt federal judge who'd been pulling the strings all along. As the helicopter lifted off, Jack realized they weren't just racing to save Emma and her baby. They were racing to expose a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of the federal court system. And they had less than 12 hours before Judge Sullivan realized. His carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. The helicopter ride to Metropolitan General took 18 minutes, but it felt like hours. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, while Dr. Kim monitored both her and the baby's vital signs. Marconi sat beside his daughter, holding her hand, and speaking to her in Spanish, gentle words that Jack didn't understand but whose meaning was clear. "How did you find out about Sullivan?" Jack asked Marconi over the noise of the rotors. "My attorney, Rebecca Morrison, came to me 3 months ago. She'd been representing Emma under an assumed name, but when she realized who Emma's father was, she decided to broker a meeting." Marconi's eyes never left his daughter's face. "She told me Sullivan had been pressuring her to reveal Emma's location." "Morrison was working for you?" "Morrison was working for my daughter, but she's smart enough to know that sometimes you need help from unexpected places." The helicopter landed on the hospital's roof, where Dr. Peterson and a full surgical team were waiting. As they rushed Emma into the operating room, Marconi turned to Jack. "Detective, what I'm about to tell you has to stay between us until this is over. I'm listening." Judge Sullivan has been using his position to coordinate criminal operations across 6 states. Money laundering, witness intimidation, contract killings, all of it filtered through his courtroom. My organization was just one piece of his empire. They rode the elevator down to the surgical floor, where Wilson and Sarah were already waiting. Wilson had arrived by car with additional federal agents who were now securing the hospital. "How much does Sullivan know about tonight?" Jack asked. "Too much," Wilson replied. "We intercepted communications indicating he knows Emma is here. He's got people inside the hospital, not medical staff, but security, administration, people who can get access." Dr. Peterson emerged from the prep room still in surgical scrubs. "We need to operate immediately. The baby is in severe distress, and Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. Marconi, has lost a significant amount of blood." "How long?" Marconi asked. 2 hours, maybe 3 if there are complications. "What about security during the surgery?" Dr. Peterson looked confused. "Security? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Wilson stepped forward. Doctor, there are people who want to harm your patient. We need to secure the operating room and recovery areas. That's highly irregular. I can't have armed guards in my OR. Then you'll have to operate knowing that someone might try to kill your patient while she's on the table, Jack said bluntly. Dr. Peterson's face went pale. I'll speak to hospital administration. While the surgical team prepared, Jack, Wilson, and Marconi developed a security plan. Federal agents were positioned at every entrance to the surgical floor. Hospital security had been briefed about potential threats, though they hadn't been told the full scope of the situation. What about the evidence? Sarah asked, nodding toward the USB drive Jack still carried. That's our insurance policy, Wilson said. As long as Sullivan thinks he can get his hands on it, he won't risk killing Emma. But if he realizes we've already copied it, then all bets are off. Morrison arrived an hour into the surgery with news that made everyone's blood run cold. Judge Sullivan just issued federal warrants for Emma's arrest, she reported. He's claiming she's a flight risk who murdered Ethan Ward to cover up her involvement in a drug trafficking operation. That's ridiculous, Jack said. Ridiculous, but legal. He's authorized U.S. Marshals to take her into custody the moment she's medically stable. Marconi's face darkened. How long do we have? The Marshals are already en route. Maybe 30 minutes. Wilson was already on his radio, calling for additional backup. We need to get Emma out of here the moment surgery is complete. She'll need days of recovery, Dr. Peterson said, appearing in the doorway. Moving her immediately after a C-section would be extremely dangerous. More dangerous than leaving her here for Sullivan's people to find? Dr. Peterson looked around the group, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. There's a recovery room in the private wing that's more secure. It's normally reserved for VIPs, but perfect, Wilson said. How much longer on the surgery? Dr. Kim is just finishing up. The baby is healthy, a little girl. Emma lost more blood than we'd like, but she should make a full recovery. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jack saw Vincent Marconi smile. A granddaughter, the old man said softly. 20 minutes later, they were moving Emma and her newborn daughter to the secure recovery room. Emma was still unconscious from the anesthesia, but the baby was alert and healthy, her tiny fist wrapped around her grandfather's finger. She's beautiful, Marconi whispered. What will you name her? Emma's eyes fluttered open. Rose, she said weakly. Her name is Rose. Jack's radio crackled with Sarah's voice. Federal marshals just arrived in the lobby. 4 of them, and they're asking questions about Emma Rodriguez. How much time do we have? Wilson asked. They're checking with administration now. Maybe 10 minutes before they get up here. Jack looked at the USB drive in his hand, then at Emma holding her newborn daughter, while her father watched with tears in his eyes. This family had been torn apart by corruption, violence, and impossible choices. He wasn't going to let a corrupt judge destroy what was left of it. Wilson, can you arrange for a secure location where Emma and the baby can recover safely? Already. Working on it. But we need to move in the next 5 minutes. Emma struggled to sit up. The evidence. Is it safe? Jack handed her the USB drive. This contains everything. Everything. Financial records, recordings, documents that prove Judge Sullivan has been running criminal operations from his courtroom for over a decade. Then it's time to end this. Marconi stood up, his expression resolute. Detective Foster, I know you have no reason to trust me, but if you're willing to work together, I can guarantee Emma and Rose will be safe while you deal with Sullivan. And in exchange, I turn myself in once this is over. Emma gets to start fresh with her daughter, and the people who've been corrupting our justice system face consequences. Jack thought about everything he'd learned over the past 24 hours. A pregnant woman who'd killed in self-defense. A father trying to protect the daughter he'd never known. A corrupt judge who'd been pulling strings behind the scenes. Of an entire criminal empire. Sarah, he called into his radio, tell the marshals that Emma Rodriguez died in surgery. Buy us whatever time you can. "Jack, that's obstruction of justice." "No," he replied, looking at Emma holding baby Rose while her father watched protectively. "That's doing the right thing." The final confrontation with Judge Sullivan was about to begin. 2 hours later, Jack and Wilson sat in the parking garage of the federal courthouse, waiting for Judge Patrick Sullivan to arrive for what he believed was a private meeting with Vincent Marconi. Emma and baby Rose were safe in a secure location, 50 miles away, recovering under the protection of federal agents who had been carefully vetted by Wilson. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. Sullivan believed that Marconi was ready to negotiate, to hand over Emma and the evidence in exchange for his own freedom. What Sullivan didn't know was that the meeting was being recorded by FBI agents positioned throughout the garage, and that the evidence he wanted so desperately was already in the hands of the U.S. Attorney's Office. "You sure about this?" Wilson asked, checking his wire one more time. Jack touched the backup recorder in his jacket pocket. "Emma's been living in fear for 2 years because of this man. Her mother spent 20 years hiding from him. It ends tonight." Sullivan's black sedan pulled into the garage at exactly midnight, followed by 2 SUVs carrying what appeared to be private security rather than U.S. Marshals. Jack recognized the driver of the lead SUV, the same scarred man they'd seen in the surveillance footage outside Emma's apartment. Sullivan emerged from his sedan, looking every inch the federal judge. Silver hair, expensive suit, the bearing of a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question. But Jack could see something else in his demeanor tonight. Desperation. "Where's Marconi?" Sullivan called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Jack stepped out from behind a pillar. "He's not coming, Your Honor." Sullivan's hand moved toward his jacket, but he stopped when he saw Wilson emerge from the shadows with his weapon drawn. "Detective Foster, I should have known you'd be in the middle of this. Where is Emma Rodriguez?" "Safe, along with her daughter." "Her daughter?" Sullivan's composure slipped for just a moment. "The baby was born?" "Healthy little girl named Rose. She'll grow up knowing her grandfather, something Emma never had the chance to do." Sullivan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think Vincent Marconi is some kind of family man? He's a killer detective, a criminal who's corrupted everything he's touched." "Funny thing about corruption, Judge. We've been investigating your financial records, your communications, your connections to criminal organizations across 6 states. Wilson stepped closer, keeping his weapon trained on Sullivan's security. "Team, amazing what 20 years of detailed records can reveal. You have nothing. Whatever lies Emma Rodriguez has been telling, actually, we have everything." Jack pulled out a copy of the USB drive. "Financial transactions showing how you laundered money through shell companies. Recordings of you ordering hits on federal. Witnesses, communications with organized crime figures in Chicago, Detroit, Kansas City." Sullivan's face went pale. "Those recordings were made illegally. They'll never hold up in court. Maybe not all of them. But Emma's mother, Maria Santos, was a federal agent. Everything she gathered during her 3 years undercover is admissible evidence. And your own voice on those recordings coordinating criminal activities. That's pretty compelling." One of Sullivan's security men stepped forward, reaching for his weapon, but Wilson's sharp command stopped him. "Federal agents have this garage surrounded. You're outnumbered and outgunned." Sullivan looked around the garage, finally understanding that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. "What do you want?" "Justice," Jack said simply. 20 years overdue, but justice nonetheless. And if I cooperate, then maybe Emma's daughter gets to grow up in a world where corrupt judges don't order the deaths of pregnant women. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the resignation of a man who knew he was beaten. "Maria Santos was supposed to die 20 years ago. When she disappeared instead of reporting back to the FBI, I knew she'd become a liability. I spent 2 decades searching for her, and when you found her, I didn't. I found her daughter instead. Pure luck, Emma's DNA hit federal databases during the Marconi investigation. I realized Maria had been hiding right under our noses, raising Vincent's child. Jack felt sick listening to Sullivan talk about Emma and her mother like chess pieces in a game. So you decided to eliminate the threat. I decided to clean up a mess that should have been handled years ago. Maria Santos knew too much about my operations. Her daughter inherited that knowledge. The other witnesses from the Marconi trial, you had them killed, necessary casualties. The Federal Witness Protection Program had become a liability to my organization. Wilson spoke into his radio. All units, move in. FBI agents emerged from their hiding spots throughout the garage, surrounding Sullivan and his security team. Sullivan didn't resist as they placed him in handcuffs, but his eyes never left Jack's face. You think this is over, Detective? You think arresting me ends anything? The network I built will survive without me. Maybe, Jack replied, but Emma and her daughter will be free to live their lives, and that's enough for tonight. As they led Sullivan away, Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emma's awake and asking for you. She wants to say thank you. The secure facility where Emma and Rose were recovering looked more like a high-end hotel than a safe house. Jack arrived at dawn to find Emma sitting by the window, nursing her daughter, while Vincent Marconi dozed in a nearby chair. The old man looked peaceful for the first time since Jack had met him. How are you feeling? Jack asked quietly. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Like I can finally breathe. Wilson told me about Sullivan's arrest. It's over, Emma. The entire network is being rolled up as we speak. The FBI has warrants for dozens of arrests. And my father. Jack looked at Marconi, who was stirring awake. They'd had this conversation during the drive over. What would happen to Vincent Marconi now that his usefulness as a cooperating witness was complete? That's between him and the federal prosecutors. But I think his cooperation will be taken into account. Marconi opened his eyes and saw Jack. Detective, any word on the others? 7 arrests so far, including 2 more federal judges and a U.S. attorney. Your testimony is going to put a lot of dangerous people behind bars. Emma shifted Rose to her shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. What happens to us now? Witness. Protection, if you want it. New identities, relocation, the whole package. But this time, it'll be legitimate federal protection, not a private security company. And if I don't want to disappear again, Jack sat down across from her. Then you go back to being Emma Rodriguez. You raise your daughter, and you try to build the normal life you've always wanted. Is that possible? After everything that's happened, it won't be easy. The media attention alone will be intense once Sullivan's trial begins. But you'll have protection, and more importantly, you'll have the truth on your side. Marconi stood up slowly, his age showing in the careful way he moved. Mija, I need to tell you something before the federal agents take me away. Emma looked up at her father with eyes that held decades of hurt and confusion. Papa, your mother, Maria, she wrote you letters. One for every birthday she missed after she went into hiding. I've been carrying them for 2 years, ever since I learned you existed. He pulled a thick manila envelope from his jacket. I was going to give these to you when I found you, but then everything went wrong with Sullivan and his voice broke. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything, for not being there when you were growing up, for the danger my life brought to yours. Emma took the envelope with trembling hands. Through the window, she could see the sunrise painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a new day beginning. Why didn't you try to find us sooner? I thought you were both dead. Sullivan told me years ago that Maria had been killed, that there were no loose ends from her operation. When I discovered you were alive, that you were my daughter, Marconi touched Rose's tiny hand. I realized I had a chance to be the father I should have been all along. Wilson appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the U.S. Marshals are here for Mr. Marconi. Emma stood up, still holding Rose. Will I be able to see him? During the trials, yes. And depending on his sentence, Wilson looked at Marconi. Cooperation of this magnitude doesn't go unnoticed by federal judges. Marconi kissed his granddaughter's forehead gently, then embraced Emma. "Be strong, Mija. Give Rose the life your mother and I never could give you." "I will, Papa." As the marshals led Marconi away, he turned back one last time. "Detective Foster, thank you for protecting my family." Jack nodded, watching the old man walk away with dignity intact despite the handcuffs. Whatever Vincent Marconi had been in his criminal life, in these final moments he'd been simply a father and grandfather who loved his family. Emma sat back down with Rose, opening the envelope of letters from her mother. The first one was dated 22 years ago, for Emma's first birthday. "I should let you have some privacy," Jack said. "No, please stay. I don't want to be alone right now." Jack settled into the chair Marconi had vacated, watching Emma read her mother's words while Rose slept peacefully in her arms. Outside, the sun continued to rise, and for the first time in days, Jack felt like they'd all made it through the darkness. "Detective?" Emma said after reading the first letter. "My mother wrote that she hoped someday I'd understand why she made the choices she did. I think I'm starting to." "What do you mean?" Emma looked down at Rose. "Sometimes love means making impossible choices. Sometimes protecting the people you care about means sacrificing everything else." Jack thought about his own choices over the past few days. The rules he'd bent, the risks he'd taken, the trust he'd placed in a criminal to save an innocent woman and her child. "Yeah," he said quietly, "sometimes it does." 6 months later, Jack pulled his car into the driveway of a small house in Millbrook, a coastal town 3 hours from the city. The house was painted yellow with white trim, surrounded by a garden that showed the careful attention of someone who'd finally found a place to put down roots. Emma answered the door with Rose in her arms. The baby had grown from a tiny newborn into a chubby, alert 6-month-old with her grandfather's dark eyes and her mother's determined chin. "Jack! I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. I finished my testimony early. How are you both doing?" Emma led him into the living room, which was filled with the comfortable chaos of new motherhood. Baby toys, picture books, and a playpen set up near the window where Rose could watch the birds in the garden. "We're good. Really good. Rose is sleeping through the night now, and I start teaching at the elementary school next week." Jack settled into the rocking chair that had become his usual spot during these visits. Over the past 6 months, he'd made the drive to Millbrook every few weeks, officially to check on a protected witness, but really because this little family had become important to him in ways he was still trying to understand. "Any word from your father?" "He called yesterday. The federal judge reduced his sentence to 8 years because of his cooperation. He'll be eligible for parole in 4. Emma's voice carried a mixture of sadness and hope. "He said the other inmates call him Grandpa Vinny because he shows them pictures of Rose." Jack smiled at that image. Vincent Marconi, once one of the most feared crime bosses in the Midwest, reduced to a proud grandfather, bragging about his granddaughter's first tooth. "How's the trial preparation going?" Emma's expression grew more serious. "Rebecca says Sullivan's defense team is trying to discredit my testimony, claiming I was coached by my father to lie about the judge's involvement. And it doesn't matter. The evidence speaks for itself. Financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from a dozen other witnesses. They can't explain all of that away." Judge Patrick Sullivan's trial had been the legal event of the decade. A sitting federal judge accused of running a criminal enterprise from his courtroom, ordering the deaths of witnesses and corrupting the justice system for personal gain. The prosecution had built an airtight case using the evidence Emma and her mother had gathered over 20 years. "Sarah called this morning," Jack said. "They reached a plea agreement with the last of Sullivan's associates. 63 people arrested. 47 convictions so far. It's hard to believe it's almost over." Rose made a soft sound and reached for Jack, who took her with the practiced ease of someone who'd become an honorary uncle. The baby gurgled happily, grabbing at his badge with tiny fingers. "She's getting so big," he said, making faces that sent Rose into delighted giggles. Emma watched them with a peaceful expression. "Jack, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about changing her name. Changing it how? Adding a middle name, Rose Foster Rodriguez. If that's okay with you." Jack felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Emma, you don't have to. I want to. You saved our lives. You gave us a chance to be a family. I want Rose to carry your name, so she'll always remember the man who chose to protect us when he didn't have to." Jack looked down at Rose, who was now trying to chew on his badge, completely oblivious to the magnitude of the gift her mother was offering him. "I'd be honored." They spent the afternoon in the garden, Jack pushing Rose in her swing while Emma tended to her vegetable plants. It was peaceful in a way that Jack had never experienced. The simple contentment of people who'd survived something terrible and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. As the sun began to set, Jack prepared to make the drive back to the city. He had early retirement papers waiting on his desk. At 52, he'd served his 25 years and earned his pension. Sarah was being promoted to detective sergeant, and she'd promised to keep an eye on the remaining cases connected to Sullivan's network. "Will you come for Rose's first birthday?" Emma asked, as Jack loaded his things into the car. "Wouldn't miss it." Emma hugged him goodbye, Rose between them babbling nonsense that sounded almost like words. "Jack, my mother's letters. She wrote about the kind of man she hoped would protect us someday. Someone with integrity, someone who would choose what's right over what's easy. She would have liked you." Jack drove back toward the city as darkness fell, thinking about choices and consequences, about the thin line between justice and vengeance, about the way ordinary people sometimes found extraordinary courage when the people they loved were threatened. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Pizza and paperwork tonight? Last chance before you become a civilian." Jack smiled and typed back, "On my way." But first he made one more stop. The florist was still open, and Jack bought a small bouquet of roses, white ones for new beginnings. He drove to the cemetery, where Maria Santos was buried under her real name, thanks to Emma's insistence that her mother deserved recognition for her sacrifice. Jack placed the flowers on the grave and stood quietly for a few minutes. "Your daughter's safe," he said to the headstone. "Your granddaughter is healthy and happy. Emma's going to be a teacher just like you wanted. I thought you should know." The wind stirred the trees around the cemetery, and Jack chose to believe. It was Maria Santos saying thank you. He drove home through the quiet streets, past the apartment complex where this all began, past the police station where he'd spent the best years of his career, toward whatever came next. Behind him, in a yellow house by the sea, Emma Rodriguez was reading bedtime stories to Rose Foster Rodriguez, safe at last in the life her mother had dreamed of but never lived to see. Some cases changed you forever. This one had taught Jack. That family wasn't just about blood. It was about the people you chose to protect, to love, to fight for when the world got dark and dangerous. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.